The stars looked different through the observation window of the horizon's edge. Captain Daniel Hayes stood with his hands clasped behind his back, watching the swirling colors of the nebula they had just passed. He had been in space for 15 years, but the view never got old. "Captain, we're picking up something on the long-range scanners," Lisa Grant called from the navigation station. Her voice carried a note of excitement that made everyone on the bridge look up. Daniel walked over to her console and studied the readings. There was definitely something out there. Something big. Something that shouldn't exist in this empty region of space. "What am I looking at, Lisa?" "A ship, sir. But it's massive. 10 times the size of anything we've ever built." She tapped a few commands into her screen. "And it's coming straight toward us." The bridge fell silent. Humanity had been exploring space for decades, pushing further and further from Earth. They had found empty worlds, strange minerals, and beautiful sights. But they had never found anyone else. Until now. "Marcus, get down to engineering and make sure everything is running smooth," Daniel said calmly. "Helen, I want you on the bridge. If we're about to meet aliens, I need our best scientist here." Marcus Webb, the chief engineer, nodded and headed for the door. Dr. Helen Price arrived moments later, her eyes wide with wonder as she saw the readings on the screen. "Is this real?" she whispered. "Very real," Daniel replied. "And they'll be in visual range in about 10 minutes. Those 10 minutes felt like hours. The crew of the Horizon's Edge prepared as best they could. They had protocols for this moment, plans that had been made back on Earth by people who never really believed they would be needed. But now those plans seemed thin and useless. When the alien ship finally appeared on the main screen, everyone gasped. It was beautiful in a terrible way. The hull was made of something that looked like liquid metal, flowing and shifting in the light of nearby stars. Weapons bristled along its sides, though they weren't aimed at the human vessel. "Not yet. They're hailing us," Lisa said, her voice shaking slightly. "Put them through." The screen changed, and suddenly they were looking at an alien face. The creature had 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern, skin that shimmered with blue and silver scales, and a mouth that seemed too wide for its narrow head. When it spoke, the words came through in perfect English, translated by technology far beyond human understanding. "I am Commander Zethral of the Valorian Empire," the alien said. Its voice was deep and carried an edge of boredom. "Identify yourself and state your purpose in our territory." Daniel straightened his uniform. "I'm Captain Daniel Hayes of the human exploration vessel Horizon's Edge. We didn't know this was anyone's territory. We're explorers seeking new worlds and new knowledge." Zethral's eyes blinked in sequence, a gesture that might have been amusement. "Humans, yes, we detected your species several of your years ago. We have been watching your primitive attempts at space travel with some interest." The word primitive stung, but Daniel kept his face neutral. "We're honored to make first contact with your empire. Perhaps we could discuss trade, cultural exchange, or alliance." "Alliance?" Now Zethral definitely seemed amused. "You misunderstand your position, Captain Hayes. The Valorian Empire has ruled this sector of space for 3,000 years. We have conquered diseases, solved the problems of energy and resources, and brought order to 200 worlds. What could your species possibly offer us?" Helen stepped forward, unable to contain herself. "Knowledge is never one-sided, Commander. Every civilization has unique perspectives and solutions. Our approaches to problems might differ from yours in ways that could benefit both our peoples." Zethral studied her for a moment. "You are emotional creatures. This much is obvious. You attach sentiment to ideas and objects. This is a weakness, not a strength." The alien leaned back in what might have been a chair. "However, the Valorian Empire is not cruel. We will offer your species a choice. You may become a protectorate under our guidance, learning from our superior civilization, or you may return to your small corner of space and remain isolated from the greater galactic community." Daniel felt his jaw tighten. "That's quite an ultimatum. May we have time to discuss this with our government?" "Of course. You have 30 of your days to bring your leaders to Crosspoint 7, a neutral station at these coordinates." Data flashed across the screen. "We will await your decision." The transmission ended abruptly. The bridge crew sat in stunned silence. "Well," Marcus said over the intercom from engineering. "That could have gone better." Daniel allowed himself a small smile. Lisa set course for Earth, maximum speed. "Helen, I want you to compile everything we just learned about the Valorians from that conversation. Every detail, no matter how small." "You think we're going to refuse their offer?" Helen asked. I think we're going to need to understand them a lot better before we make any decisions. Daniel looked back at the stars. They called us primitive and emotional. They think those are weaknesses, aren't they? Lisa asked quietly. Helen was already working at a spare console, her fingers flying over the controls. Not necessarily. Emotion drives creativity, empathy, and determination. And being primitive just means we're younger, not stupider. She paused. Did you notice how rigid Commander Zethrall seemed? How every word was measured and formal? Daniel nodded slowly. I did. Like he was following a script, exactly. 3,000 years of empire might mean 3,000 years of doing things the same way. Helen pulled up an image of the Valorian ship. Look at their vessel. It's perfectly symmetrical. Every weapon placed in an exact pattern. Beautiful but predictable. And predictable can be useful, Daniel mused. Keep working on that analysis, Helen. I have a feeling we're going to need every advantage we can find. The horizon's edge turned toward home, leaving the massive Valorian ship behind. But Daniel knew this was just the beginning. Humanity had finally found other life in the universe, and that life thought humans were weak and primitive. Maybe they were right. Human ships were slower, human weapons less powerful, and human technology generations behind Valorian capabilities. But Daniel had learned something important in his years as a captain. The strongest person in the room wasn't always the winner. Sometimes the winner was the one who understood the game better. As Earth grew closer on the navigation charts, Daniel made a decision. He would report everything honestly to the Admiralty and the government, but he would also make a recommendation. The Valorians saw emotion as weakness and primitive technology as inferiority. Let them keep thinking that. Let them believe they understood humanity. Because Daniel was beginning to suspect that the Valorians, for all their power and ancient wisdom, understood very little about what made humans dangerous. They saw a species that felt too much and knew too little. They didn't see the curiosity that had driven humanity to the stars, the stubbornness that had helped them survive countless disasters, or the creativity that had solved problems that should have been impossible. The Valorians offered a choice: submit or hide. But Daniel was starting to think there might be a third option, one that would take time, patience, and a willingness to appear weaker than they were. 30 days to make a decision. It would be enough time to start planning. Not for war and not for surrender, but for something the Valorians with their 3,000 years of empire might never expect from a primitive, emotional species. Survival. 5 years had passed since Earth accepted protectorate status. In that time, humanity had learned to play their role well. Valorian advisors walked the halls of human institutions, teaching and observing. Human students studied Valorian technology and culture. Trade routes opened, and human ships carried goods to alien worlds under Valorian supervision. To any outside observer, humanity appeared to be settling into their place in the empire. But appearances could be deceiving. Captain Daniel Hayes stood on the bridge of the horizon's edge, now upgraded with some Valorian technology. His crew had grown more experienced, and Lisa Grant had become one of the best navigators in the human fleet. They were currently surveying a system the Valorians had marked as uninhabitable, a dying red giant with 3 rocky planets too close to its swollen surface. There, Lisa said, pointing to a readout. 3rd planet. It's got caves deep enough to shield from the radiation, and there's water ice in those caves. Daniel nodded. Mark it for colony potential. Amy will want to see this. Marcus appeared on the communications screen from the engine room. Captain, the Valorian sensor dampeners are working perfectly. As far as anyone knows, we're just doing a routine mineral survey. Good. Let's keep it that way. This was the reality behind the facade. While humanity publicly studied under Valorian guidance, they were also quietly spreading across space in ways their supposed protectors never noticed. Every worthless system humanity surveyed became a potential colony site. Every trade route humanity traveled became mapped and memorized. Every piece of Valorian technology humanity studied was adapted and improved in secret laboratories. Back on Earth, Dr. Helen Price had become an expert on Valorian psychology. Her office was filled with recordings of interactions between humans and Valorians, all carefully analyzed. Today she was meeting with a group of military officers, including Admiral Peter Lynch. The key thing to understand, Helen explained. Pointing to a chart on her screen, is that Valorians process information sequentially. They look at problem A, solve it, then move to problem B. They're excellent at this approach, which is why their technology is so advanced. But, prompted Admiral Lynch, but they can't handle multiple problems simultaneously, not the way humans can. If you give a Valorian 3 tasks, they'll complete them perfectly one after another. Give a human the same 3 tasks, and we'll try to do all 3 at once. Probably mess up at least one, but potentially find connections between them that lead to new solutions. A colonel named Henry Brooks leaned forward. How does this help us in combat situations? It means Valorian tactics are predictable. They follow doctrine precisely because that's how they think. They'll execute complex battle plans flawlessly. But if something unexpected happens, they take longer to adapt. Helen pulled up combat simulations. We've been training our pilots differently. Not to fight better, but to fight more chaotically. On another continent, in a facility hidden beneath the Australian outback, Marcus and Nathan were working on something the Valorians knew nothing about. They called it Project Redundancy. The Valorian quantum drive is impressive, Nathan said, studying the holographic blueprint. Single-point power generation, perfect energy efficiency, and it never breaks down. Which means if it does break down, they're stranded, Marcus added. Our drives are less efficient, but we have backup systems for our backup systems. Exactly. So let's take that principle further. Nathan expanded the hologram to show a new ship design. What if we built vessels where every critical system had not 1 backup but 3? Different types of backups using different principles? Marcus smiled. The Valorians would think it's wasteful and inefficient. It is wasteful and inefficient. It's also survivable. Nathan rotated the design. A ship like this could lose half its systems and still function. Maybe not well, but function. The Valorians would never build something like this. No, they wouldn't, that's the point. Across human space, similar projects were underway. Engineers developed weapon systems with multiple firing mechanisms. Biologists created crops that could grow in a dozen different environment types. Architects designed space stations that could reconfigure themselves for different purposes. Everything humanity built had one quality the Valorians never valued: flexibility. Amy Chen stood on the observation deck of Forward Station 7, one of 30 research outposts humanity had established in systems the Valorians ignored. Through the window, she could see a planet with purple skies and emerald oceans. 300 people lived here now, growing food in underground farms and building homes into the sides of cliffs. How's the population adapting? Asked her assistant Sophie Blake, a young woman who had never even seen Earth. Better than expected. We've got families here now, children being born. Amy pulled up statistics on her tablet. In 10 years, this place will be completely self-sufficient. In 20, it could support 10,000 people. And the Valorians have no idea it exists. Oh, they know it exists. It's on their charts as Scientific Outpost 772. They just don't care enough to check what we're really doing here. Amy smiled. They're so focused on their core territories and major trade routes that they never look at the edges of their empire. Why not? Because in 3,000 years, nothing has ever threatened them from the edges. They've never had to worry about what happens in the dark spaces between stars. Amy turned from the window. That's going to be their mistake. Far from human space, the Krell swarm was moving. No one knew where the Krell came from, only that they consumed everything in their path. They were a hive mind, millions of organisms thinking as one, and they had just discovered the edge of Valorian territory. The first contact was a disaster. A Valorian patrol fleet encountered a Krell scout force near a mining colony. The Valorians, confident in their superior technology, engaged according to standard doctrine. They were destroyed within hours. The news reached High Commander Zethral 3 days later. He studied the reports with growing concern. The Krell didn't fight like anything the Valorians had encountered before. They had no formation, no tactics in the traditional sense. They simply swarmed, adapting instantly to whatever the Valorians did. Send the 7th Fleet to reinforce the sector, Zethral ordered. Standard defensive formation. The 7th Fleet was one of the Empire's finest. 500 ships all equipped with the latest technology. They took up position at a strategic jump point and waited for the Krell to attack. The Krell didn't attack the jump point. They went around it, striking at 3 undefended colonies simultaneously. By the time the 7th Fleet could reposition, thousands of Valorians were dead. Zethral called an emergency council. For the first time in centuries, the Valorian Empire faced an enemy they couldn't easily defeat. The hive mind of the Krell didn't think like the Valorians. It didn't follow predictable patterns. It adapted constantly, learning from every encounter. "We need new strategies," one admiral argued. "Our strategies are sound," Zethral insisted. "The Krell are simply numerous. We need more ships, more firepower." Or, a younger Valorian officer suggested hesitantly, "we could ask the humans for help." The council chamber fell silent. The idea was almost insulting. Ask their primitive protectorate species for military assistance? But as reports continued to come in of Krell advances, Zethral made a decision. "Contact Ambassador Wright. Tell her we require human assistance in defending against the Krell threat." Karen received the message while attending a cultural exchange on the Valorian homeworld. She read it twice, keeping her expression neutral, then excused herself to make a private call. "Admiral Lynch, you need to hear this." 10 minutes later, the United Earth Council was in emergency session. The Valorians were losing a war and they wanted human help. "This is our chance," said Admiral Lynch. "Not to refuse them, but to show them what we've really been doing for the past 5 years." "We send our fleet?" someone asked. "We send our fleet," Peter confirmed. "But not to fight the way they fight. We fight the way only humans can fight. Chaotic, unpredictable, and adaptive." Daniel received his orders 2 days later. The Horizon's Edge would join a human task force being sent to the Krell front. Lisa plotted the course while Marcus made sure every system was ready. "We're really going to war," Lisa said quietly. "We're going to save an empire that thinks we're primitive." Daniel replied, "And in doing so, we're going to teach them something important." "What's that?" "That sometimes the best strategy isn't the most efficient one. Sometimes survival means being messy, complicated, and human." The human fleet assembled near Mars. 50 ships, each one a mix of human ingenuity and adapted Valorian technology. They didn't look as sleek as Valorian vessels. They weren't as large or as powerful. But each ship was crewed by people who had trained for exactly this kind of situation. Commander Nicole Berg led a squadron of fighters. Lieutenant Jake Morrison commanded a destroyer. Engineers like Sophie Blake kept the ships running with repairs that Valorian manuals said were impossible. And throughout the fleet, human creativity prepared to face an enemy that no rigid doctrine could defeat. As the fleet jumped toward the war zone, Peter Lynch stood in the command center on Earth, watching them go. Karen stood beside him. "Think they'll understand after this?" Karen asked. The United Earth Council chamber was built deep beneath Geneva, protected by layers of rock and steel. Today it was filled with representatives from every nation, all staring at the holographic display floating above the central table. The Valorian ship rotated slowly in the projection, its alien beauty both mesmerizing and threatening. Admiral Peter Lynch stood at the head of the table, his gray hair and weathered face showing his 50 years of service. Next to him, Ambassador Karen Wright shuffled through her notes one more time. They had been preparing for this meeting for 2 weeks, ever since the Horizon's Edge had returned with news of first contact. "Let me be clear about our situation," Peter began, his voice carrying the weight of command. "The Valorians are offering us a choice, but it's not really a choice at all. Either we become their subordinates, or we stay isolated while they control all the trade routes and resources in this region of space." A delegate from Brazil raised his hand. "What about fighting them?" Peter shook his head. "Their technology is centuries beyond ours. One Valorian ship could destroy our entire fleet. Fighting is suicide. Then we submit?" asked the representative from Japan. "I didn't say that either." Peter nodded to Karen, who stepped forward. "We've been analyzing the Valorians for the past 14 days, Karen said. "Dr. Helen Price has provided us with detailed observations from the first contact. What we've learned is fascinating. The Valorians are powerful, yes, but they're also predictable. They think in very straight lines." She touched a control, and the hologram changed to show Valorian text and symbols. "Look at their language. It's completely logical, with no idioms, no metaphors, and no humor. Every word has exactly one meaning. Their society operates the same way. Clear hierarchies, established procedures, and no deviation from protocol." "How does that help us?" someone asked. Helen's voice came from the back of the room. She had been invited to the council as an expert witness. "It helps because we're the opposite. We're chaotic, creative, and emotional. Things they see as weaknesses are actually our greatest strengths. She walked to the front, her enthusiasm evident despite the serious situation. The Valorians have ruled for 3,000 years. That's incredible. But it also means they've been doing things the same way for 3,000 years. They've stopped evolving, stopped adapting. They've reached what they consider perfection and stopped there. And we haven't reached perfection, Peter added. We're still growing, still changing, still learning. That gives us flexibility they don't have. A representative from Nigeria leaned forward. So what do you propose? We pretend to submit while secretly preparing to rebel? No, Karen said firmly. We actually submit. We accept their protectorate status. We let them teach us, trade with us, and think they're guiding us. But while we're doing that, we pursue our own agenda. Peter activated another hologram, this one showing a star map. Red markers indicated Valorian territories. Blue markers showed human colonies. And scattered throughout the empty spaces between were green markers. These green markers represent systems the Valorians have deemed worthless, Peter explained. Too far from trade routes, resources that are difficult to extract, or environments that are challenging to colonize. The Valorians have ignored these systems for centuries. But we won't ignore them, Karen continued. Humans are good at making the worthless valuable. We settle harsh worlds. We find creative solutions to difficult problems. While the Valorians focus on their core territories, we spread quietly into areas they don't care about. Helen added, we also learn everything we can from them. Their technology, their tactics, their way of thinking. We study them like scientists study any subject. Not to copy them, but to understand them completely. The council erupted in discussion. Some delegates were excited by the plan. Others thought it was too risky. A few believed humanity should refuse any contact with the Valorians entirely. Peter let them talk for several minutes before raising his hand for silence. I know this isn't what anyone wanted. We all hoped first contact would be friendly, a meeting of equals. But we have to deal with reality. The Valorians are powerful, and they're not particularly interested in us except as subordinates. But they also underestimate us. We can use that. How long would this plan take? Asked the delegate from Australia. Decades, Peter admitted. Maybe longer. This isn't about a quick victory. It's about survival and eventual independence. We play the role they expect, learn what we can, and grow in ways they won't notice until it's too late. Karen stepped forward again. In 30 hours, I'll be traveling to Crosspoint 7 to meet with Commander Zethral. I'll accept the protectorate status on behalf of Earth, but I'll also begin gathering intelligence. Every meeting, every interaction is a chance to learn more about how they think. The vote took 2 hours. In the end, the council approved the plan with a strong majority. Humanity would bow to the Valorians, but it would be a calculated bow, not a surrender. After the meeting, Peter and Karen stood alone in the chamber, looking at the star map. Do you think it will work? Karen asked quietly. I think we don't have a choice but to try, Peter replied. The Valorians are strong, but strength isn't everything. They've forgotten that if they ever knew it. Meanwhile, in another part of the complex, Helen was meeting with Marcus and a team of engineers and scientists. They had a different assignment. The Valorians use quantum drives for faster-than-light travel, Marcus explained, pointing to technical schematics on the screen. Their version is more efficient than ours, but the principle is similar. We can learn from their design without copying it directly. A scientist named Nathan Cruz nodded. But we shouldn't just improve our existing technology. We should develop alternatives, multiple ways to solve the same problem. Exactly, Helen agreed. The Valorians have optimized their solutions. They have the best version of each technology, but best also means inflexible. If we have 3 different ways to achieve faster-than-light travel and they only have one, we have an advantage they don't even recognize. Redundancy, Marcus said, understanding dawning on his face. Not because our technology is worse, but because our approach is different. Right. And while they're teaching us their methods, we keep developing our own. Helen pulled up another screen showing colony data, which brings us to the expansion plan. A colony coordinator named Amy Chen joined the conversation via video link. Her face appeared on a side screen transmitted from a settlement on Mars. I've been reviewing the systems Admiral Lynch marked as worthless. About 40% of them are actually viable for human habitation. They're just difficult. Difficult is relative, Nathan said with a slight smile. Humans have lived in deserts, on ice sheets, and underground. We're good at difficult, Amy nodded. I can have colonization plans ready within 6 months. Small expeditions at first, presented as scientific outposts or mining operations. The Valorians won't pay much attention. And in 20 years, those outposts become self-sufficient colonies, Helen said. In 50 years, they become launching points for further expansion. Marcus looked at the star map, his engineer's mind already working through the logistics. We'll need better ships, faster construction methods, more efficient resource use. We'll develop them, Nathan said confidently. The Valorians will help us improve our technology to their standards. They won't realize we're using those improvements to pursue goals they never asked about. The team worked late into the night, refining plans and solving problems. This was what humans did best. When faced with an impossible situation, they didn't give up. They got creative. Across the solar system, similar conversations were happening. Military officers discussed new training methods that emphasized adaptability over rigid doctrine. Teachers began developing curricula that would prepare the next generation for a future among the stars. Artists and musicians, often dismissed as impractical, started creating works that celebrated human uniqueness and resilience. The Valorians had offered humanity a place in their empire. A small place, a subordinate place, but a place nonetheless. What they didn't understand was that humans were never good at staying in the places others assigned them. Karen left for Cross Point 7 2 days later. Her ship was small compared to the Valorian vessels around the station, but she held her head high as she walked through the alien corridors. Commander Zethral waited in a vast chamber surrounded by other Valorian officials. Ambassador Wright, Zethral said formally. Have your people reached a decision? We have, Karen replied, keeping her voice steady. Earth accepts protectorate status under the Valorian Empire. We look forward to learning from your civilization and contributing what we can to the galactic community. Zethral's 4 eyes blinked in that sequential pattern. A wise choice. We will send advisors to help guide your development. In time, your species may prove useful. Useful. Not equal. Not respected. Useful. Karen smiled and nodded, playing the role of the grateful subordinate. But inside she was taking notes. The way Zethral stood, the patterns of speech, the assumptions underlying every word, all data, all useful. Humanity had just bought itself time. Time to learn, time to grow, and time to spread quietly into the darkness between stars. The Valorians thought they had gained a new subordinate species. 20 years after the Krell War ended, High Commander Zethral decided to visit Earth. He was old now, even by Valorian standards, and he wanted to see the world of the species that had surprised him so completely 2 decades earlier. His ship emerged from faster-than-light travel near Mars, and immediately he noticed something was different. The orbital shipyards that had been so busy during the war were quiet, many of their berths empty. The flow of traffic to and from Earth had slowed to a fraction of what it once was. Something is wrong, Zethral said to his crew. Contact Earth Command. Request permission to dock. The response came quickly enough, and soon Zethral's shuttle was descending through Earth's atmosphere toward Geneva. The city looked as beautiful as ever, but there was a quality to it he couldn't quite define. It felt like a place that was waiting, or perhaps remembering. Ambassador Karen Wright met him at the landing pad. She was older too. Her hair completely gray now, but her eyes still held that spark of curiosity that he remembered. High Commander Zethral, she said warmly. Welcome to Earth, it's been too long. Ambassador Wright. I hope I find you well. Very well, thank you. Please come with me. I've arranged for us to have tea in the observation lounge. I think you'll enjoy the view. They walked through corridors that felt strangely empty. The Earth government complex had once been bustling with activity, filled with people rushing to meetings, coordinating trade, managing the countless details of being part of the Valorian Empire. Now it was quiet. The observation lounge overlooked the city and the mountains beyond. Karen poured tea with practiced movements, an Earth custom Zethral had learned to appreciate over the years. You have questions, Karen said, not waiting for him to ask. The orbital facilities are nearly empty. Your government complex is understaffed, and I have reviewed the trade figures. Human commerce with the Valorian Empire has declined by 70% over the past decade. Zethral leaned forward. Ambassador, what has happened? Is Earth in some kind of crisis? Karen sipped her tea slowly. Not a crisis, Commander. The opposite, actually. We're doing quite well. Then where are your people? That's the question, isn't it? Karen stood and walked to the large window. Let me show you something. She activated a holographic display that showed the stars beyond Earth. Zetherall expected to see the familiar map of Valorian space, with human colonies marked in their designated sectors. Instead, he saw something that made all four of his eyes widen. Hundreds of markers, thousands of markers, spreading out into regions of space that weren't even on Valorian charts. What am I looking at? Zethril asked quietly. Human colonies, settlements, stations, research outposts, all the places we've established over the past 20 years. Karen zoomed out and the display showed even more markers, spreading like a web through the dark spaces between stars. 72% of humanity now lives beyond Valorian territory. Not in rebellion, not in hiding, but simply out there, exploring and building new homes. Zethril stood, his usual calm demeanor cracking. This is impossible. We would have known. Our surveys are patrols. Your surveys map valuable territories. Your patrols protect trade routes and inhabited systems. You never bothered to chart the worthless regions, the difficult systems, the places that weren't profitable or strategic. Karen smiled gently. We did. Over 20 years, we've been slowly, quietly spreading into all the empty spaces you ignored. But why? We offered you full membership in the Empire. Equal status. Access to all our resources, I know, and we're grateful for that offer, truly. Karen returned to her seat. But we realized something during the Krell War, something important. We don't want to be part of your empire, Commander. Not because we dislike you, but because we're not like you. Zethril sat down slowly, trying to process this information. Explain. The Valorian Empire is 3,000 years old. It's stable, powerful, and perfect in its way. You've optimized everything, created the best solutions to every problem. You've reached the end goal of civilization. Karen poured more tea. But humans aren't looking for an end goal. We're looking for the journey itself. We want to keep exploring, keep changing, keep becoming something new. So you left. We're leaving. It's not finished yet. Right now, about 8 million humans remain on Earth and in near-Earth space. But that number decreases every year. In 50 years, Earth will have perhaps 1 million permanent residents, mostly people maintaining historical sites and managing relations with species like yours. And the rest of your species? Scattered across the galaxy, living on worlds you deemed uninhabitable, thriving in systems you marked as worthless, building cultures and societies that are uniquely human, shaped by the environments they inhabit. Karen pulled up images of human colonies. Purple skies and emerald oceans, red deserts and frozen mountains, space stations built into asteroids, cities floating in gas giant atmospheres. We're everywhere and nowhere, Commander. We're becoming something you never anticipated. Zethril looked at the images, finally understanding. You were never going to stay. Not in one place, no. That's not what humans do. We wander, we explore. We find empty spaces and fill them with life and stories. Karen's expression grew thoughtful. When you first met us, you saw our emotions as weakness and our primitive technology as inferiority. You offered us a place in your empire out of something like pity. I admit that is true, Zethril said quietly. But what you didn't understand is that we were never trying to match your strength. We were learning from you, yes, studying your technology and your methods, but we were also planning to leave from the very beginning. Not in rebellion or anger, but because staying in your empire, even as equals, would mean becoming more like you, and we didn't want that. You wanted to remain chaotic. We wanted to remain human. Karen smiled. Your empire has given the galaxy 3,000 years of stability and order. That's an incredible achievement. But humans offer something different. We're the species that settles impossible worlds, that builds homes in places others consider worthless, that keeps moving even when there's no logical reason to move. Zethril was quiet for a long time, looking at the star map with its thousands of human settlements. When I first met Captain Hayes, he stood on his small ship and faced my vessel without fear. I thought he was foolish. Now I understand he knew something I didn't. What was that? That size and power aren't the only forms of strength. That sometimes the winner of a confrontation is the one who walks away to fight a different battle entirely. Zethril's eyes blinked in that sequential pattern. You never intended to beat us. You intended to outlast us. Not even that, Karen corrected gently. We intend to coexist with you. The Valorian Empire will endure for thousands of years more, I'm sure, but it will endure here, in the regions you've already claimed. And humanity will be out there in all the places you never wanted. We'll visit, trade, share stories, but we won't stay. And if we try to stop you, if we declare these expansions illegal? Karen met his gaze steadily. Then you'd have to patrol millions of cubic light years of space you've spent 3,000 years ignoring. You'd have to police systems that don't threaten you or compete with you. You'd have to spend enormous resources stopping people who just want to live on harsh worlds far from your trade routes. She paused. Or you could let us go and remain friends. Zethral understood the choice she was presenting. The Valorian Empire could try to contain humanity, but it would be like trying to catch smoke. Humans had spread too far into too many places, and all of those places were exactly the regions the Valorians had no interest in controlling. I would like to see some of these colonies, Zethral said finally. Would that be possible? Karen brightened. Of course. I can arrange for a tour. Fair warning, though, they're not like Valorian worlds. They're messy, inefficient, and sometimes barely habitable. But they're alive in ways that might surprise you. 3 days later, Zethral's ship arrived at a human colony on a world called Haven. It orbited a red dwarf star and its surface was mostly rock and ice. By Valorian standards, it was worthless. By human standards, it was home to 30,000 people. The colony coordinator, a young woman named Lisa Grant Jr., granddaughter of the navigator who had served with Captain Hayes, met them at the landing site. She wore practical work clothes and had ice crystals in her hair from the cold wind. "Welcome to Haven, High Commander," she said cheerfully. "Sorry about the weather. We're having a warm day, it's only -20. Zethral followed her into the colony, which was built into the side of a massive cliff. Inside, it was warm and bright, heated by geothermal energy and lit by efficient fusion lamps. People walked through corridors carved from rock, laughing and talking. Children played in a central plaza where someone had planted a garden of earth vegetables, growing under artificial lights. "Why here?" Zethral asked. "Why build a colony in such a harsh environment?" Lisa shrugged. "Because it was empty and we could. Because the challenge was interesting. Because the minerals in these cliffs are useful for manufacturing. Because the view from the surface at night, when you can see 3 moons and the nebula, is absolutely beautiful." She smiled. "Take your pick of reasons. Humans don't always need logical justification." The battle at Threshold Gate would be remembered as the turning point of the Krell War. Not because it was the largest battle, or the most destructive, but because it was where the Valorians finally understood that their human protectorate was something more than they had imagined. The Krell swarm hit the Valorian defensive line like a wave of living darkness. Millions of small ships, each controlled by the hive mind, moved in patterns that seemed random but weren't. They probed, tested, and adapted with every passing second. The Valorian fleet responded with precision, their weapons firing in calculated patterns, their formations holding strong, and they were losing. High Commander Zethral watched from his command ship, his 4 eyes tracking the tactical display. The Valorians were fighting perfectly, executing every maneuver exactly as doctrine demanded. But the Krell didn't care about doctrine. For every Krell ship destroyed, 10 more took its place. And worse, the hive mind was learning from every exchange, finding weaknesses in Valorian tactics. "Human fleet approaching," his tactical officer announced. Zethral turned to see the ragged formation of human ships entering the battle space. They didn't move in the clean geometric patterns of Valorian vessels. Instead, they came in clusters, groups, and seemingly random configurations. It looked chaotic. It looked wrong. "Direct them to reinforce Section 7, Zethral ordered. "We need to hold the left flank." But the human fleet didn't go to Section 7. Captain Daniel Hayes had other ideas. "Lisa, take us through that gap in the Krell formation," Daniel commanded. "Marcus, I need all available power to forward shields." "That gap is probably a trap," Lisa warned, even as she adjusted their course. "Probably," Daniel agreed. "But the Krell are expecting us to avoid it. So we're going through it." The horizon's edge plunged into the Krell formation with a dozen other human ships following. The Krell ships converged, trying to surround them just as the hive mind had planned. But Daniel had planned too. "Now, Lisa. Pattern Delta 7. The human ships suddenly scattered, each one moving in a different direction. There was no formation, no geometric precision. To the Valorians watching, it looked like panic. To the Krell hive mind, it was impossible to predict. The Krell ships hesitated for 3 seconds, trying to decide which target to pursue. 3 seconds was enough. Commander Nicole Berg brought her fighter squadron through the gap the Krell had created, targeting their larger command vessels. Lieutenant Jake Morrison's destroyer came from another angle, weapons firing not at Krell ships but at the space between them, creating debris fields that disrupted their coordination. "What are they doing?" a Valorian officer asked Zethral. "I don't know," Zethral admitted. The human tactics made no sense. They broke every rule of proper military engagement. And yet the Krell formation was fragmenting, their perfect coordination disrupted by the sheer unpredictability of human movements. Helen Price had theorized this would work. The Krell hive mind was incredibly adaptive, but it adapted based on patterns it could recognize. Human tactics, chaotic and emotion-driven, created patterns the hive mind struggled to process. It was like trying to predict where a leaf would fall in a storm. "All human ships implement Protocol Chaos," Daniel broadcast on the Fleet Channel. Protocol Chaos was something only humans could execute. Each ship captain was given broad objectives but complete freedom in how to achieve them. There was no central coordination, no master plan. Instead, 50 ships operated independently, making decisions based on instinct, experience, and split-second judgment. Sophie Blake, working in the engine room of a frigate called the Wanderer, felt the ship shudder under Krell weapons fire. "We've lost main power to the port side," she called to her captain. "Can you fix it?" "Not the way the manual says," Sophie replied, already pulling panels off the wall. "But I can reroute through the environmental systems. We'll have to breathe recycled air for a while." "Do it." This was the advantage Marcus and Nathan had built into every human ship. Systems that could adapt, repair themselves in ways that weren't elegant or efficient but worked. When a Valorian ship lost a critical system, it withdrew for repairs. When a human ship lost a critical system, the crew improvised. The battle raged for 6 hours. Human ships darted through the combat zone, attacking from unexpected angles, retreating when they should advance, advancing when they should retreat. They lost ships. The destroyer Pathfinder was destroyed when it deliberately rammed a Krell carrier, giving other human vessels time to escape. The frigate Dawn's Light sacrificed itself protecting a damaged Valorian cruiser, but they were winning. Slowly, impossibly, they were winning. Zethral watched in growing amazement as the Krell swarm began to pull back. The hive mind, unable to predict human movements, unable to adapt quickly enough to their chaotic tactics, was withdrawing to regroup. "Valorian fleet, advance," Zethral ordered. "Drive them back while they're disorganized." The Valorian ships moved forward in perfect formation, their weapons delivering devastating precision fire. With the Krell disrupted by human tactics and the Valorians pressing their advantage, the battle turned decisively. Within another hour, the Krell had retreated entirely, leaving the threshold gate secure. Daniel stood on the bridge of the horizon's edge, watching the tactical display clear. They had lost 12 ships and over 300 people. But they had won. More importantly, they had proven something. "Captain Hayes, this is High Commander Zethral. Please join me aboard my vessel for a debriefing." An hour later, Daniel stood in the command chamber of the Valorian flagship. Zethral looked different somehow, less certain than before. "Your tactics were highly irregular," Zethral said. "Yes, sir. They violated every principle of proper military engagement." "Yes, sir. And yet they were effective." Zethral's eyes blinked in that sequential pattern. "I do not understand how. Your ships are less powerful than ours. Your weapons are inferior. Your formations were chaotic. By all logical analysis, you should have failed." Daniel chose his words carefully. "Commander, may I speak freely?" "Please." The Krell hive mind is incredibly intelligent and adaptive. It learns from patterns and responds perfectly to logical tactics. Your forces fought brilliantly, executing every maneuver with precision, and that precision made you predictable. Predictability is a flaw? Zethral seemed genuinely confused. Against an enemy like the Krell, yes. They couldn't predict us because we don't always know what we're going to do ourselves. Human tactics are based on intuition, improvisation, and individual decision-making. It's messy and inefficient, but it's also harder to counter. Zethral was silent for a long moment. "You have been our protectorate for 5 years. We thought we understood your species. We saw emotion as weakness, chaos as inferior to order. And now, Now I wonder what else we have failed to understand. Zethral stood and walked to a viewport looking out at the damaged but victorious fleet. The Valorian Empire has endured for 3,000 years because we perfected our methods and followed them precisely. But perhaps perfection has made us rigid. Dr. Helen Price would have been proud. This was exactly the realization she had hoped the Valorians would reach. Over the next weeks, human forces continued to support the Valorian military against the Krell. Every battle followed the same pattern. Valorians would engage with their superior technology and precision tactics. The Krell would adapt and push back. Then human ships would arrive, fighting with their chaotic, unpredictable methods, disrupting the hive mind's coordination long enough for the Valorians to regain the advantage. The war turned. The Krell, unable to handle the combination of Valorian strength and human unpredictability, began a long retreat back to wherever they had come from. Back on Earth, Admiral Peter Lynch received reports of each victory, but he was already thinking about what came next. The Valorians now respected humanity, had seen what humans could do. That respect would come with new opportunities and new dangers. Karen returned from another meeting with Valorian officials, where she had been offered greater integration into the Empire's structure. They want to give us full membership, she told Peter. Access to all their technology, seats on their councils, everything. What did you tell them? I told them we would consider it carefully. Karen pulled up a star map showing the secret expansion of human colonies. But Peter, we need to think about what we really want. Do we want to be part of their empire even as equals? Or do we want something else? Peter studied the map. Over 5 years, humanity had established 47 hidden colonies in systems the Valorians ignored. Those colonies now supported over 200,000 people. Children were being born who had never seen Earth, who thought of distant worlds as home. We've spent 5 years learning from them, Peter said slowly, learning their technology, their language, their way of thinking. But we've also been learning what we don't want to become. A 3,000-year-old empire that stopped growing? Exactly. The Valorians are powerful, but they're static. They've reached what they consider perfection and stopped there. That's not who we are, Karen nodded. So what do? We keep accepting their friendship and their technology. We keep trading and learning, but we also keep expanding quietly into the regions they don't care about. And when we're ready, when we've grown strong enough,